Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Stay Healthy at Home webinar series. We're so excited you could be here this afternoon for another installment of the webinar series. So before we get started, I'll give everybody a couple seconds just to get settled in and comfortable before we begin. I see some familiar names and we're so happy to have you back. Thank you for joining. All right. So my name is Ashley Ritchie, and I am the director of the New Jersey Self-Advocacy Project. We are so happy that you joined us today for another installment of the Stay Healthy at Home webinar series. This is a webinar series that happens every Tuesday from 2 to 3 o'clock. As always, if you have questions, comments, any feedback that you'd like to share, just pop that information in the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will do our best to address those throughout the presentation. So we also ask that you fill out the brief survey that will pop up at the end of our time together. We'd like to know how you enjoyed today's topic, as well as any topics that you'd like to see us cover in the future. So without further ado, I am so excited to announce our guest presenter today, Dr. Alison O'Connor. Dr. O'Connor is a licensed psychologist and board-certified behavior analyst who specializes in working with individuals who are dually diagnosed with an intellectual and developmental disability and a psychiatric disorder. She is currently the Director of Clinical Supports at the ARC Ocean County chapter and has a private practice, Fern Psychological Services, where she sees patients virtually. Alison spends all her free time loving her 3 wild pups, and we are so grateful she is here today.
Hey, thank you, Ashley, and thank you guys for coming. So I hope that I can give you some good info over the next hour, but I am really relying on you guys throughout the presentation to give me some feedback too. I'm going to ask some questions about your experiences as well. Oops, let me just see if I can get to the next slide. I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay. So again, in your little widget on the side there, anytime I might ask you a question, you can put your answer right in there, and I'm going to read it. If you don't want me to read it, you can specify that, but it'll be good to share with everybody some of this stuff that we talk about today and your experiences, because I'm one person, but you guys we're all together. We got a lot more information. So we went through this already. I'm not putting this here to try to feel very special, but I just want you to know where I'm coming from with the information that I'm sharing. So again, I'm one person. There are plenty of other kinds of therapists out there who do things differently, or even the same kinds of therapists who do things differently. So it was how I've been trained and how I've grown. But like I said, things will look different depending on where you go, and that doesn't mean it's wrong or bad, but this is just my experience based on where I went to school and where I trained. Okay, so here we go. I'm going backwards. Jeez, I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so here's our outline for today. We talked right here, this term dual diagnosis, and Ashley mentioned it as well, as someone who so some people think of that term to mean someone that has a mental illness and a substance abuse issue, meaning some problems with alcohol or drugs. What I use it to mean, and what people in this part of the field use it to mean, is someone who has an intellectual or developmental disability and a mental illness. So even that, though, we kind of need to break down what is a mental illness. Why do some people have mental illnesses and other people might not? And at what point would someone need to get help if they were showing signs of a mental illness? What might help look like? Like I said, it can look very different. And how can you get the help? So along the way, though, I obviously want to give a little bit of a warning that we're going to talk about some harder things when we don't have to necessarily talk about anyone's specific experiences. This is not meant to diagnose anyone with anything. I know sometimes when we hear different symptoms of things, we might get a little bit worried. I know that I do when if I'm looking up something on the internet that, I was saying before that my knee hurt, so that maybe I'm Googling that and I'm starting to get really worried that I have this really bad knee problem. So this is really just meant as a first step of just some basic information and not meant to diagnose anyone with a mental illness or to give anyone more anxiety about it. So if that is how you're feeling and you're really worried about that maybe some of this is true for you, please send a message and I can help you get through that and see what we could do to figure that out. Also, a little warning that I am working from home today, so I have these pups here, and at any moment they might get a little rowdy. So if you have sensitivity to noise or particularly not interested in hearing dogs barking, I apologize. I will mute myself as soon as it happens. So I might cut out for a second. And again, I apologize. If you want to mute me at any time, please feel free. Okay, so diving in. Again, this is a little reminder of where the questions are, the question box is. I know that I had trouble finding it sometimes with all these different platforms. So it's right on the side, okay? All right, so dual diagnosis, like I said. So it's when someone has, and I'm going to use the term IDD so I don't have to say the whole thing. Maybe we'll cut some time out, and a mental illness. So what is a mental illness? Here's your first chance to use that question box. Again, I know that not everyone, some people here might be individuals yourselves who are curious, some may be staff, other professionals. What have you heard of as a mental illness? Maybe a specific example, or is there a way that you would describe it? You can put anything that you're thinking in the question box, and I'll just leave a minute there. Hopefully we'll get some responses. It can be really tough to define. All right, so if anyone has any feedback on this one would be great. Otherwise, I will go over to our next slide. Okay, so a mental illness. Sometimes we might hear it by a different name. Oh, here we go. Here's somebody. Thank you, Denise. An imbalance in mental functioning that impacts our work or relations. That is very nice and very technical. So exactly. So sometimes we hear it from other names. Like I was, sorry, I'm just moving the box around so I can see. So people might call it a psychiatric disorder, a mental condition, a mental health condition, a mental disorder. Maybe something more casual, people might say that someone maybe they're troubled or they have issues. Some words might kind of imply something not great, or judgmental and less sort of professional. So that's why we're really trying to use kind of these technical terms. So that's great, Denise, that you kind of just saying the facts there. That's great. So the mental illness, what can it affect? It can affect our thoughts, and we'll go through that. It can affect our feelings and our sensations. So our sensations are like our bodily feelings. We'll talk more about that. Our actions and behaviors. And just as Denise said, it impacts our work or our relations, and it interrupts our lives in some way. That's a really important part. So it's not just a moment in time, right? Of course, all of us should be able, I would hope, to experience a wide range of feelings throughout the day, throughout the week. So it's not feeling sad when you're watching a movie, right? It's something bigger than that really impacts you. Let's see. And it's really important too for us to realize and kind of try to tease apart sometimes what are typical reactions to things like grief. If we've lost someone that we love, or maybe we've moved away from somewhere to a new home, those are things that we would expect to have reactions towards, positive or negative. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a mental illness because you're feeling very strongly about a certain situation. So that's important to think about too, whether you're someone yourself struggling with that or you're supporting someone who is, to think about what is kind of the course of typical life for all of us and what is beyond that. And we will get to this a little bit more too, also thinking about where our physical bodies and medical conditions play a role in this as well. So we don't want to jump to thinking that someone has a mental illness because there are changes to their thoughts, feelings, or behaviors if we haven't addressed that there might be some kind of medical condition going on as well. All right. Okay, so now thinking about why do some people have mental illnesses and why do some people not? On the right there, that picture, that is a tangled web. That is somebody's illustration, somebody who suffers from a specific, or I don't know if he's suffering, but who is diagnosed with a specific mental illness, depression. This is his illustration of the tangled web. I'm just having a little bit of a technical issue. I'm sorry. The question box is so narrow. I can't. I'm trying to read these questions, but I'm scrolling like furiously. There's another question here from Denise. Okay, is it considered an illness, a situational issue becomes chronic and prolonged? Great, that is a great question. Yes, so we will talk a little bit more about that. But like I was saying before, so for example, grief is a great example. Maybe that's what you were thinking in your head, or if we move somewhere, or different kinds of changes in our life, if we cannot sort of process ourselves through it with our natural supports around us, if it becomes prolonged and does interfere in our relationships and our lives, then absolutely that's something that we would want support for. Whether or not we get slapped with a diagnosis or not doesn't prohibit us from getting the help that we need. So why? This is an important question because it can help us, can lead us to different kinds of treatment, but we don't always figure out exactly why. And that's sort of what I was saying about this tangled web, that for all of us, we have a lot of different parts of us. And answering the question of why for any part of our life, whether it's mental illness or our personality or why we like our favorite color, is really difficult. But some things we do know through different experiments and research is that this list on the left here are some things that can contribute. So our relationships. What are our relationships like? How many do we have? Are they meaningful to us? Do we have 100 friends, but we're not really close to them? Do we have 2 or 3 really good supportive friends? What's our relationship history like? Have we had a hard time with others? Maybe we experienced bullying in our life or some other kind of tough relationships. Coping styles. So a coping style is, I'm sure that you guys have heard out in the world people talk about maybe use your coping skills, or I need to learn some new coping skills. So what does that mean? A coping style is whenever we're stressed as a person, what do we typically do to help ourselves? So for me, my coping style might be when I get really anxious, for example, this is true. I ask a lot of questions and I ask the same question over and over again. That's one of my coping styles. It helps me. It helps me to calm down. It might irritate some other people around me momentarily. And so that's something that I'm working on, but that is like my go-to thing, that I keep asking questions. That's my coping style. Someone else's coping style might be when they're feeling really sad, they might spend all their time alone. And maybe they use that same coping style whenever they're having a strong emotion. Genetics. So this is talking about things that we're born with as a result of who our parents are, who our grandparents are, who our biological family is. So genetics determine things like our hair color, our eye color, our height, things like that, but they can also play a really strong role in development of different kinds of mental illnesses. Some are linked more to genetics than others. But that, again, even if we know that, that doesn't necessarily give us the answer of how we can fix it. So then again, chemicals in the brain. So sometimes, again, when we were earlier, when I was talking about what people might call different mental illnesses, some people might say you have that so-and-so has an imbalance, a chemical imbalance. Again, that may be true, and that imbalance might cause the mental illness, or it might be a result of the mental illness. And that's why sometimes people take medications to help them get through a mental illness. It restores the chemicals to their to the levels where we would want them to be. I'm not a psychiatrist and I cannot prescribe medication, so I'm not the best source of information on this, but this is certainly something that you can talk with your primary care doctor about, or a psychiatrist more about. But I can help you find those answers if you're very curious about it. Trauma. So there's many different kinds of trauma. I know that what comes to mind at first might be things like accidents or natural disasters, but then also things like trauma that has to do with relationships, like I was talking about at the beginning, different kinds of abuse or neglect. But also when we're thinking about trauma, it's really important to widen our view a little bit, because it can be very different for different people. Some parts of our life where one of us might think is a very typical thing, like moving out and onto your own, might actually be very traumatic for somebody else. So it's important that we don't necessarily apply that label for somebody, that it's something that they can apply to their own experiences. I see someone has put an example in here about breaking up with a girlfriend could be a really hard time. Absolutely. That can be a trauma depending on how it goes, thinking about if that was a very important relationship or maybe one of the very few relationships. What kind of support system did you have around you when you were going through that breakup? Did you have other people that you could connect with? Thinking about support systems, not just like the individuals around us, but our community too. So the Self-Advocacy Project is a great support system. The ARC of New Jersey is a support system that all you guys are keyed into and participating in, which is phenomenal. But even thinking about your local government, have they set up maybe low-cost treatments for people to access with different kinds of insurance? My dogs are part of my support system. So again, thinking outside the box about what a support system means. Similarly, life stage, where are we in life? Similar to moving out on your own, like that's a change in life stage, right? Thinking about as our parents get older, I know that's, for me, that's an example, right? My parents are now in their 70s. So that's a big change for me, where I'm now supporting them a lot of the time, and thinking about, they're both relatively healthy, but thinking about, what's going to come up in the next 10 or 20 years, ideally. Also for ourselves, when we start to get older, things change. Thinking about our lives, being faced with death is a really hard thing for many people. but also other parts of life stages, maybe we get married, maybe we have children, maybe we get divorced, um, things like that. So sort of those markers in life, where are we? A lot of people come to get some help right after high school. I know that that's a big, big, hard transition, especially for those of you who received services throughout high school, maybe either special education or were really tapped into a lot of recreation. And then when you graduated, a lot of those services might not have existed anymore. It's great though, like I said, I'm not trying to kiss up here, but this project, the self-advocacy project, is a great way to pick up kind of where you left off, but there aren't nearly as many services right after graduation as when you're younger. So that's a big vulnerable time in life. So then I was looking for some feedback here. If you guys had any other ideas, and I see some in the question box, I'm trying to scroll through. Can a vitamin or nutrient deficiency impact our? Absolutely, absolutely. Again, these can go both ways. Some lead to the mental illness, like vitamin D is very, very important. It can lead to both the mental illness, such as depression, but it also can look like depression because you might be very low energy, might be, sort of feeling pain in your body. And it also might come from being depressed because you might not be moving around, you might not be eating so healthfully, you might not be getting outside in the sun all the time. So then another question. So the pandemic has impacted many people globally, rapid change, and absolutely reports of high rates of death and sickness. Completely. That's a unfortunately great example of something that's affecting all of us across the world, but it's also affecting us differently. Some of us might be might have been very fortunate and not gotten sick ourselves, and maybe our family has stayed healthy. Other people have had to deal with sickness themselves or in their family, or maybe working with people who were sick. Maybe being kind of in a very dangerous situation every day. Absolutely. And that even for some of us who maybe we were able to stay home or we had to stay home, looking at it that way too. So some of us might have thought, wow, this is great. I can stay home, stay with my family, stay healthy at home. And other people might have really been missing very important parts of their social system and their support system by not getting to see their family or go to day program or earn money at their job. And maybe even just being exposed to it every day on the news. It's really tough. All right. So these are great questions and great examples. And like we said, so there are so many parts. So going back to this slide where we talked about how it can affect our thoughts, feelings and sensations, and actions and behaviors. So we're going to go through those. And this is a part where just want you guys to keep in mind that a lot of these examples are part of everyday life. But when it gets to be something that goes on for longer, or maybe is too intense, or is something that we're feeling like we can't manage anymore, then of course we want to get some help. So thoughts. So we got a little picture here of this cute guy whose head is filled with thoughts, right? All of us have thoughts throughout our day. But like I said, sometimes it can be too overwhelming. We might have the same thought over and over and over again, or we might have so many thoughts that we can't make sense of them. We might not be able to organize our thoughts. We might feel confused a lot of the time. So in some way, our thoughts have changed. So these are examples of thoughts that you might feel, or you might, think more frequently during a time when you're struggling with a mental illness, such as I can't do it, I give up, I failed, this isn't real, no one likes me, I hate my body, I have to leave, I'm in danger, I can't stop. So again, these are examples of things that I think, at least for me, I'll speak for myself. I've definitely had all of these thoughts at some point in my life. Uh, but it didn't mean that I had a mental illness at every moment of my life. Again, sometimes they might come into our head and then they might go out. And sometimes they're good thoughts to have, like I'm in danger. If you really are in danger, that's a good thought because that's going to help you get to feel safe and to go to safety. But if we're thinking I'm in danger all the time, and you're thinking that you're in danger when you're sleeping at bed at night, even though you're living in a very safe home, you're thinking you're in danger maybe every time you drive in a car, even though you have your seatbelt on, you're driving safely, or you're with a safe driver, then that can start to really interrupt your life. But so that's an example of really thinking about, is the thought helping me? Is it making things harder for me? And can I let the thought go, or is it there all the time? And am I even able to really organize my thoughts? So maybe someone who's thinking like this isn't real, they might have a hard time organizing their thoughts. So sometimes we might feel real overwhelmed, right? Like I definitely felt overwhelmed before I started talking to you guys today. I'm feeling better now as I'm going. But at the beginning, I had so many thoughts in my head, I couldn't really organize them. But that has passed. If that stayed in my head for the whole day, for the whole week, for the whole month, that would be really difficult for me to get anything done, to participate in my own life. And so that's where we can really try to see what is kind of something momentarily and what is something that's continuous. Someone has put in the question box, bad things about body. Absolutely. That is something that many of us struggle with. Thinking about our body and maybe being really focused on our body or obsessed with some part of our body, and judging our body or other people's bodies, focusing on other people's bodies. That can be something that can be unfortunately very common, but also very distressing. So feelings and sensations. So feelings, I'm sure you guys could think of about a million feeling words. Thinking about happy, sad, angry, afraid, confused, hurt, lonely. If you throw any more in the question box, there are lots and lots of feelings. So again, we're looking at a change in our feelings, or feelings that are not changed. They've changed from how they used to be to something different, and they're not getting better, or they're maybe really upsetting us. And then sensations we're thinking about is like a feeling in our body, so a bodily sensation. So stomach aches, headaches, muscle aches, let me think, vision problems, hearing things differently than you used to, feeling things on your skin in a different way. Again, these are all, like I want to continue to make the point that we want to make sure that there isn't something medical going on. So that doesn't just go for the bodily sensations, that's for all of it. But this is a particular one where we can feel our mental illness in our body sometimes before we see any change in our thoughts or our feelings or even our actions. We might just feel it in our body. For example, some people, maybe you have migraines, and they might come on after a really stressful day, or asthma. So that's a medical condition, but it might get worse because of a mental illness or some symptoms of a mental illness. Can anyone think of any other things that I've missed in this section that they want to add in, either thoughts or feelings or sensations? I want to make sure you guys are having an opportunity to put in your input too. Okay. Well, if anything comes up, you just type it right in. So then we can talk about behavior. So our actions and our behaviors. I know sometimes people say that oh, behave or behave yourself. I don't mean it in that way. I mean, anytime we're moving our body or doing something, that's a behavior. So anything that someone can observe you doing or you can observe yourself doing, we can think of as a behavior. So eating, sleeping, talking, moving, those are all different kinds of behaviors. So that they don't mean that they're good or bad. That's just something that our body does. We can think of them as actions. So we're wanting to look at changes, though, in our behaviors or our actions. So are we eating more or less than we used to? Maybe we support someone who doesn't speak, but we're noticing a change in their behavior. So this is important to look out for too. So maybe that person is refusing to eat or throwing their food. Or maybe if this is about you, you notice you're just not feeling hungry anymore. Or maybe you're feeling like you just can't eat enough. Sleeping. So either we're sleeping way more than we used to, we're sleeping all day, we're still feeling tired, or we're wishing we could sleep all day, or maybe at night we just can't sleep no matter how hard we try, or maybe we're feeling like we don't even need to sleep, that we're have so much energy even though we aren't sleeping. Those are all big changes that are important. Talking. So are we talking really fast all of a sudden and for a long period of time? Obviously, when maybe we get really excited about something, we might talk fast for a few minutes. This is different. This is lasting a couple days. Maybe we're not talking at all. Maybe we're slowing down how we're talking or slowing down how we're moving, or maybe we're talking and moving very quickly. Maybe we're moving in different ways altogether. Maybe we're moving in ways that harm ourselves. We're hurting ourselves in some way. We're hurting other people. Those are all really important to keep track of, either for yourself or whomever you support. Can you guys think of any other changes in behaviors that might be linked to a mental illness or to struggling in some kind of emotional way that comes out in your behavior? Let me see. So Denise, you are asking great questions. Like, oh, there we go. What are some ways to assess the mental health? That's great, of children or adults with IDD. So we're gonna get to that soon. These are all ways to assess the mental health, right? So looking at these changes, but as I had said, some people might not use their voice to communicate. They might communicate in other ways. So it can be difficult to look at, because if that person can't report exactly their changes in their feelings or thoughts, we might really want to focus on what can we see changes in their behavior. So even for sleeping, so for an example, we might notice that we're tired all the time, we're sleeping all the time, but we're also having nightmares. And we can talk about how we're having these really bad dreams and they're stressing us out. But some people don't remember their dreams, and even some people who might remember their dreams can't necessarily talk about them. But what do we notice when they wake up? Are they opening their eyes and immediately screaming? Are they waking up screaming? Are they crying when they wake up? That's a clue that someone might be having a nightmare. So really having to get creative, but also these are things where we're wanting to notice it, and then we can bring that to the attention of a professional who can ask more questions and try to do that assessment in a more in-depth way. Let's see, all right, here are some examples. Anger or lashing out at others, absolutely. We might get aggressive, or we might feel really agitated at other people. Becoming impatient or frustrated, so much easier than usual, absolutely. That is a big one, right? We see that across populations, whether you have an IDD or not. That is a really common symptom of mental illness. That can be a sign of anxiety or a sign of depression. A lot of different mental illnesses can come up in this sort of agitated state. Let's see. Oh, I'm figuring out how to read the questions. Looks like someone is saying here that they want to talk nice with someone and not have a bad word and not fight with friends and family. Absolutely, those are goals. but that can be really hard to do if you're struggling, right? Withdrawing from those who normally support, absolutely. So is this person choosing to spend time in their room rather than hang out with you when that was something that they really used to want to do? So great examples. Thank you, guys. All right, so we've talked through it a little bit. Obviously, like I said, this is not meant to diagnose anyone or to be a crash course in teaching you how to diagnose someone, but what to look for so that you can bring that to a professional, like I said. So even though that now we have the beginnings of some tools to be able to do that, actually being able to access help can be really difficult. And I say that as someone in the field. And so these are a few of the reasons. So lack of resources. So the fact that you guys are here today is great. You've all tapped into this. There's a handful of people here, though, across the entire state. There's a lot more people that aren't getting to hear this, or maybe aren't even aware that they could come, or there aren't other people throughout their lives or other places that they can go to bring these concerns. Even being aware of it. Obviously, in some families or cultures, or even in my family, not even in my family, of course, in my family, in many families, awareness of a mental illness in general, IDD or not, it can be very limited. Money, insurance are really big barriers to getting care for many people, again, IDD or not. Again, another barrier here for getting help is that a lot of times, again, if someone maybe isn't able to speak about their problems, they're not the ones that are bringing themselves to the therapist or to the assessment. Someone else is bringing them because they've decided that they're behaving in a way they don't like, or that they're getting on their nerves. So it's kind of changing the way that we're viewing the problem, because we're being, as professionals, only given part of the picture. And so it's really important that the focus be on the person who is identified as the patient. What is their experience like? Diagnostic overshadowing. So this is a very technical jargon sort of word, but it's very important for this population, for the IDD population. I don't know if any of you guys have experienced this, but having a major diagnosis like an intellectual or developmental disability, or let's think of another major diagnosis, dementia or heart disease, medical, physical, or mental, or cognitive or neurological, epilepsy. When you go to the doctor for other reasons, a lot of the times the doctor will attribute any symptom that you go to with them to that initial diagnosis. So let's say you have heart disease and you go to the doctor because your ankle is really hurting. They might say, well, it's because you are not exercising enough and your heart isn't pumping the blood the right way. When in reality, maybe you just twisted your ankle. So with IDD population, a lot of the times, if someone with IDD is maybe crying a lot of the time, or maybe is not eating, then a doctor might think, well, this is part of their IDD. It's because they have a disability. They don't know how to do it, or that's just what autism is. Well, that's not true. So this is where advocates, self-advocates and advocating for others really comes in very important. Being able to say that you understand that you have a diagnosis of an IDD, but that this is different. This is something in addition to that. And that you need treatment regardless of that. And so that goes hand in hand with clinician preparation. Medical doctors, psychologists, social workers, counselors, nurses, all of us in this field, we don't get a lot of good training in being able to work with lots of different populations. That is unfortunately the truth. We have to kind of seek it out if it's something that we want to educate ourselves on. Hopefully that is changing. throughout the different fields. I can speak specifically about training as a psychologist. There is not a lot of training on the IDD population, and certainly not any training that I received on mental illness in the IDD population that I would have gotten normally through my coursework. I had to go out and find it because it was important to me. So that leads to that diagnostic overshadowing, people looking for the easiest answer. I'm just checking. Diverse clinicians, absolutely. Same thing, right? Training. So obviously, maybe we can't find a clinician who is of a race or ethnicity or gender or religion that we feel comfortable with, that we think understands that important part of our life. Even if they're not the exact same match as us, we still need someone who is trained and sensitive in that and can notice that the differences and can speak on those differences. Very important. Yes, so someone here is talking about different kinds of help. So sometimes this is a great example. So this gentleman is saying that when he's at ShopRite, he might ask for help to pick up a big water bottle, right? So that's a great example. So that can be a hard thing to ask for help sometimes. But it sounds like you're practicing asking for different kinds of help throughout your day. That's great. All right, so I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit here because I've been kind of going slow, and that's my own fault. So what can help look like? So again, I'm going to speak to my experience as a helper and what it looks like when you come to a clinic or an outpatient setting like the kinds that I've worked at. Let me see, just make sure I'm getting everything. Okay. All right, so there are, again, thinking about the typical things that happen in our life, people passing away, moving. I've given a lot of the examples, the same ones over and over, but those are things that a lot of us will mostly, I think all of us experience at some point in our life. It's important though that if we're supporting someone who maybe just lost a parent, passed away, unfortunately, we need to think about where is the person's natural supports. So it can make us all uncomfortable to see someone suffering, but thinking about what might be most effective for that person in the moment isn't necessarily to drive them over to a therapist that they've never met and have them sit there and talk through it with someone they've never met right after the passing of their parent. So thinking about what is the normal grieving process, thinking about your own experience as an example, if you're someone who's been through it, and then thinking about where is this individual's natural supports, or if you are someone going through it, where are your natural supports? Not everything needs to be dealt with kind of hitting the road to go find a specialist. Sometimes the more beneficial treatment, if we can, use that term, would be who is already in your life. Maybe you're really close to a staff member, and just sitting and talking with that staff member every day for a few minutes or an hour, a week, or whatever it might be, is going to be way more meaningful for you to get through it. Maybe talking to your best friend, right? Might be way more meaningful than going to meet a stranger in a different place for something that is an unfortunate but normal part of life. Again, there are things that go beyond that, though, where we would need professional help. And so if you do go to see a therapist, again, this is just my experience and how it would work with me or with a team that I've worked with in the past or currently working with. The first step would be to interview you or you and your support system, one or more people in your support system, or maybe if you're someone that struggles to speak, we might just interview your support system, but have you there and contributing as much as you can, if you can, in different ways. If you use a device, or you can write or draw or play, those are other ways that we can communicate. So the initial interview, where we're going to ask a million questions about how your life usually is, what's different now, why you're looking for help, what are you working on. that's what my end looks like. Your end, the main thing to expect is that you should feel safe and respected by the people who are interviewing you. If you don't, then that's something to say. One way that they can communicate safety and respect to you is by explaining confidentiality to you, explaining to you that what you say to them is confidential, and then upholding that confidentiality. Confidential means private, means that they're not going to go tell everybody what you said. Of course, there are limits to that privacy. If you express that you're in danger, they're going to want to help you, but they're going to communicate that to you in a way so that you're part of the process and showing you that respect. They're going to take into account your guardianship status. They're not going to assume because you have an IDD that you have a guardian. And if you do have a guardian, they're going to involve that guardian in the process, or another person who you feel is important in your life. Informed consent. So consent, I know, is talked about a lot in these webinars, different kinds of consent throughout our lives. Us saying that we agree to do something, that we give another person permission to engage in an activity with us. And we're giving that consent with knowledge of what's happening. So they'll likely give you all this paperwork to sign that's really complicated, but the important thing is that they will explain it to you. And they will get your permission before asking you any questions. And you will have an opportunity to stop the interview at any time. They will explain to you what therapy is, or from their point of view, what to expect if you were to work with them. So we'll get to that a little bit more when we talk about a treatment plan. So with that person, with that therapist, are they going to meet you at your apartment? Are they going to ask that you come to their office every week? Are they going to want to see you 2 times a week? Are they going to talk to you on the computer instead? So those are all things that they are going to need to explain to you, and that if they don't, you should ask, or you can have someone help you ask. They're going to want to know how you see what you're going through as a problem, how your support person sees it. They're going to ask you lots of questions, like I said, to investigate all the different symptoms, but also your coping strategies and how you see yourself. So they're going to look at the hard parts of your life, but also what goes well, what works for you. You are able to ask any question you have of the therapist. It's not a one-way conversation. Like I said, they're going to ask you a million questions because they're trying to get a real good picture of who you are. But this is a perfect opportunity for you to ask them any questions. And then at the end of the meeting, they're going to propose to you an initial treatment plan. So they might say, I'll call you in a week, but at some point at the beginning, they'll propose an initial treatment plan. So what might that look like? They're going to think about what is your therapeutic need, meaning what can be addressed in therapy. So maybe you're someone who has really intense anxiety that is affecting your ability to stay friends with people or to go to work. And so they want to address that in therapy with you. But maybe they're also thinking that you also could really benefit from a medication to help make that possible. Maybe they're thinking that's the day program that you're going to, that you're feeling so anxious about, maybe isn't a good fit for you. Maybe your social system doesn't have so much support in it. Maybe you aren't working or not going to a day program. Obviously, with COVID, things have changed a lot, but if we're at home by ourselves all week, 1 hour of therapy isn't necessarily going to fix that, and that isn't necessarily the issue, right? So we might just be doing better if we were able to get involved in a schedule with our community. And again, this post-high school vulnerability that I talked about before, this is a big, big thing. So is this person really kind of, maybe they're suffering with depression because all of their supports have gone away after high school, and that's where they need to go. How can I keep dual diagnosis person out of the ER? How to get behavior therapy? We will get there. If I don't answer it, I will try to scroll back. All right, so what is therapy? This is a big quote with a lot of a lot going on in it. Um, it's a way to express emotion that involves, you're not just venting, right? You're not just sitting down in front of your therapist and going through and complaining about and blowing off steam, but you're being asked to think about things, to engage your body in a different way, to think about your life in a different way, so that you can start to face those experiences in a different way, stop avoiding them. You're going to move your body around, say words differently, and that's going to lead to changes in your brain. And that will lead to change in the way you regulate yourself, the way you interact with other people. So in a way, well, we'll get to this. I want to solicit from you guys. So we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try to get through this as quick as possible without skipping over the goods. But what to you is therapy? What have you heard therapy is or isn't? I'll give you a couple seconds here to pop anything in that box you want. And Joe and I will come back to your question. All right, anyone? Any last call? Okay. All right, so therapy it's one tool, right? There are other tools out there. Here, thank you. Thank you, Erin. Getting an outside perspective on issues, absolutely. So getting outside of our own head, right? So it's one tool. Other tools can be medication, like I said, getting a different kind of schedule, maybe living in a different environment. Therapy is sometimes hard or painful, right? That's a big part of informed consent, that that the therapist is explaining to you that it's going to be difficult. It's a collaboration. It's not one-sided conversation. It's you working with your therapist or the other members in your therapy session. It's a practice, so it's something where you're returning to it over and over again, and you're building a skill and you're practicing different ways to think and feel and move. It should, so it is, and also should be, I should say, a safe place where you're accepted, and it's not, your therapist is not judging you. Therapy isn't a quick fix, right? It's not a one-time appointment. It's not easy. It's certainly not easy as a patient or client. It's not a therapist giving someone rules. So sometimes people are brought to an intake by someone hoping that I will tell them to stop doing that and go to work every day and take a shower at night. That's not what therapy is. It's not giving someone advice either. It's helping someone get to their own conclusion. And it should certainly not be a punishment. It should not be, you better behave or you're going to have to go back to see Allison. If someone is resistant to going to therapy, there is absolutely no benefit to forcing it, because it later will become a process that is not an option anymore. A process which promotes healing, wholeness, or well-being. Love it. That should be on a business card or something. That's beautifully put. Okay, so something that I've been trained on and did a lot of is group therapy. Group therapy is really, really important. I know that a lot of us have maybe gone through social skills, which is on the left. If the black dot is the facilitator or therapist, typically social skills is one therapist sort of teaching a bunch of people at the same time. But if you look on the right-hand side, the group therapy model that is most effective. Again, the black dot is the therapist and the white dots are the members of the session. You can see the therapist is connected to every patient there, but the patients are all connected to each other too. And look at how strong this connection is when you have everybody connected. It's a very strong web that you're weaving there. This is my favorite quote to describe why group therapy is so important. By the crowd they have been broken, by the crowd they shall be healed. So a lot of times, like we went at the very beginning, we were talking about why some people struggle with mental illness, and relationships was number one there. So this is an opportunity to experience relationships in a different way and repair them. And group therapy, unlike one-on-one therapy, can teach you all of these other things. accepting others, feeling accepted by others, feeling hope when you see your peers make progress, feeling hope for yourself, universality, which means that you're not alone in a struggle, that you're seeing other people are struggling with the same things, that feelings are universal, even if the details are different, a way to understand ourselves, a way to model for other people. It gives us a chance to provide guidance to someone else, right? You don't have that opportunity in one-on-one therapy. And altruism, this idea that you're giving just for the sake of giving to another. That again is not something you have the opportunity to do necessarily on a one-to-one session. So group therapy, I'll plug it forever. What makes a good therapist? This is a tough one. So at the very beginning, I said where I work, what my specialization is. Okay, that's one thing, but that doesn't mean I'm a good therapist. What makes me a good therapist or someone else a good therapist? What do you look for in a therapist? What would make someone a good therapist for you? The most important thing is the relationship with you. So yes, maybe they went to a great school and they had great training and they have all the diplomas on the wall and a beautiful office. But if you're not feeling a relationship with them, if they're not warm, accepting, and empathetic towards you, it's not a great match. And if you're not feeling like you can share that with them and say, hey, I don't feel close to you, and I don't think you know how I feel, and maybe you're not even able to tell if I'm processing what we're talking about, that is not a great match. And you can say that to your therapist. They want you to say it. So help. What am I going to say here? Okay, so different kinds of help, where you can go. Again, I'm not going to say anywhere that I don't have firsthand knowledge of, because I would hate to put a resource here and for me not to have the experience to back it up. So the ARC, Ocean County chapter, this is where I currently work. This is the phone number and extension for Kristen Creed. She is the person you would call if you wanted to set up an initial appointment. The Arc of Monmouth, I worked there for many years. They have a beautiful team. They have a psychiatrist there and a nurse practitioner as well, who can prescribe medications. That's Dr. Shafee. She's phenomenal. And Mary DeSane is wonderful as well. This Self-Advocacy project, where you are right now, keep coming back to the webinars. Contact them if you have more that you want to hear. CPC Behavioral Health is a big network that has a lot. They have group homes, they have group therapy, individual medication, and they are not shy about working with the IDD population. And they are not shy to say, we need more help. Your primary care doctor. So finding a psychiatrist can be really hard. You might have to wait a long time, but your primary care doctor might be able to prescribe you medication, or they might be able to refer you to someone that they know and trust. Your support coordinator, if you have one, is a great resource as well. Maybe they don't have the answer, but it is their job to chase it down for you and find the answer. So again, thinking about where are your natural supports. This is another group, bigger support, National Association for the Dually Diagnosed. The PID.thenad.org is great. It has all of these different workbooks. If you're someone that likes to draw or write or have something, that you can hold on to, this is great. If you're a support person to someone else, you can download these for free and go through them. There's a goodbye book. There's my favorite things. It's a way to begin conversations. They're really wonderful. They have a lot of other resources on there. So your question, I'm sorry, I forget the name, but the question about trying to stay out of the ER. Trinitas is a wonderful, wonderful resource. They have a team called their CARES team, and that's the phone number there. If you are working with someone who is really struggling right now and you're trying to avoid a hospitalization, or you want a hospitalization to be as effective as possible, call the CARES team and open a case with them. They will send a clinician, or they will, obviously with COVID, things are a bit different. They will walk you through the process. They will come out. They will consult with you for behavioral supports as well, and try to get some supports in place to avoid that. Hospitalizations can be costly, traumatic. They can also be very effective. And Trinitas is a wonderful team. It's a very small unit up in Elizabeth, but the team is mobile throughout the entire state, and they are great. That is who I would definitely say to call if you're worried about a hospitalization. That is it. Oh, I'm 1 minute over. I'm sure there was a question that I missed. I'm reading another one from Denise. For those we advocate for, need us to be their voice. Sorry, it's hard to read it. Their voice in sharing the needed information or continuing to see. Absolutely. That's great. And you can model that too. That is also a goal that we're talking about advocacy, right? You can model that. You can help support the person say it for themselves in whatever way they can. You don't want to speak for them, obviously, but sometimes given disability or limitations or the mental illness, that is something that you need to do. And that's a big role and a really important one. So we are out of time, but if you have any last minute questions, please pop them in the box, but you can also email me anytime. I believe my email should be somewhere. If it's not, I'll put it in the slides so that when I send them to be posted, it'll be there, my phone number. I may not be the best therapist for you. I'm not looking for business, but I can certainly steer you in other directions, as I know that you guys are from all throughout the state. So thank you for having me, and I hope that this was helpful in some way.
Thank you so much, Allison. That was wonderful and very informative. Thank you to and the thank yous are rolling in the chat too. That's great to see. Thank you all for being here today. We hope that you will join us again for our Stay Healthy at Home webinar series every Tuesday from 2 to 3. So thank you, and I hope everybody has a great afternoon. Take care.